Hello and welcome to the second of Abe's complete commentary of any and all Star Trek episodes. Today I am starting with the original series, Season 1, Episode 2, Where No Man Has Gone Before. Now, just as a couple of starting kind of comments, I just want to thank anyone who has listened to my initial podcast where I talked about the pilot episode, The Cage. And if I do get any feedback on that, I will certainly take that on board. I may even read a few comments on any future episodes that that are podcasts that I do. And I once again want to thank you. Thank you for listening. I have also reawakened my Twitter feed, which is at Warrior346. So if anyone wants to kind of comment to me there, as well as the email at warrior346@yahoo.com. All right. So this episode is the first time that we meet the illustrious Captain James. In this episode, R. Kirk, which we'll find out about later in the episode. The only carryover person from the original pilot of The Cage is Spock, who is being promoted to first officer on the Starship Enterprise, and it starts with a distress signal being received. And we do get to see something which does make a recurring kind of viewing, that of a game of 3D chess. So at this point, we will start watching Where No Man Has Gone Before, and here goes with our commentary. So it turns out that the distress signal is coming from an old-style ship recorder. Which is labelled the Valiant, a ship that was lost apparently in this area of space about 2 centuries ago. One thing, just to back up to the chess game for a moment, that I do find interesting and does become a bit of a recurring theme is how unpredictable humans can be. Spock thought that he was going to win the chess game, but the captain ended up doing something which he didn't expect. Something which does become a bit of a recurring theme throughout the series, in that the way that Kirk is able to fight in rather unique ways to keep his crew alive and to overcome the various situations that that he gets faced with. In relation to the probe or ship recorder that they've beamed aboard. We'll learn more about that in a few moments. I am pleased to that we do get to see Scotty for the first time in this, and that the crew starts to is starting to be put together. The uniforms still need a little bit of work, but that does get ironed out in later episodes as well. So I've just been introduced to the various department heads, and the captain has made his announcement to the crew. What they're about to be doing, but. And Spock is trying to recover the information from the data recorder. I find it interesting that a psychiatrist or ship's counselor, if you will, is in this, I'll call it the second pilot episode of the series, and that, to the best of my knowledge, although I will feel free to correct myself later if I come across it, this is the only time that, until the Next Generation, that a therapist actually makes a appearance in the original series. Something which I think is in some ways something interesting to note, because the crew, no doubt going into the unknown, will face lots of things that they never had before. I mean, there is an exploratory vessel, and some of these things can have quite the mark, and it is worth having someone there to deal with the mental issues that that they may face. So Spock has just finished reviewing the Valiant's or the recordings to find out what happened to the ship. They were encountered an energy barrier of some kind and were thrown clear, and after that a crew member started to gain some kind of supernatural powers, and the captain then became captain of the ship, the Valiant, became very worried and got to a point where he was looking at destroying his own ship. As a side point of interest, in another book by Peter David, Q Squared, a very interesting one. I do strongly recommend those of you who haven't to read it. It is available in audiobook as well as ebook and various formats. We find out that the energy barrier is actually a prisoner for a Q-like entity named Trelane. Not that he makes an appearance at this point. Well, there's a later episode that we'll actually get to properly encounter him, but it's interesting to think that that's where that these are some minor Q-like powers. One of my favourite characters from Next Generation onwards that that we'll get to encounter and talk about later. But we'll see. We'll continue reviewing the episode. So after going through that, the captain decides to proceed and proceed to the edge of the galaxy to try and leave it, and they encounter the same energy barrier that the Valiant did. Get fairly badly damaged as a result. The captain realizes it's a bad idea to be in there, and two crew members, Gary Mitchell, an old friend of the captain's, and Dr. Dana, the psychiatrist, both get affected by something. It kind of appears to be kind of a lightning blast, sort of electric. And are both knocked unconscious. Not long after this, they decide to leave the energy barrier and lick their wounds and see what needs to be done about repairing the ship. Gary Mitchell, it turns out, and Dr. Dana both survived their encounters, but Gary's eyes, for some reason, are glowing. They haven't quite found out the reason for this yet, but they do realise that each of the people affected by the barrier had a high degree of ESP, or extrasensory perception. Gary having the strongest capacity for this of all, which of course would make him more susceptible to the powers that the barrier was containing. I just noticed a point of interest. The captain is now visiting with Gary in the infirmary, and Gary starts to show a little of his power by recognizing that it was the captain who entered without even looking. But the captain references an old event, that kind of happened between the two of them on the planet of Deneb 4, which also happens to be the same place that the Enterprise D visits in the pilot episode of Next Generation, entitled Encounter at Farpoint, which goes to show that there is will be a bit of a disconnect a minor disconnect between the two series, because while it is referenced that the Federation has had contact with the Deneb people before, it doesn't seem the relationship doesn't seem to be that long lasting, because there is a good I think it's about 100 years roughly between the two series, maybe less, but in between here, the start of original series and Next Generation, there certainly is a number of decades at the very least, and the relationship between the Denebians and the Federation doesn't seem to be that. Seems to be something very recent when Next Generation starts up. After reminiscing about old times, Gary has two more minor displays of his increasing power levels. One is just a bit of an echoey, booming type voice as the captain starts to leave, and the second is that he can, starting to read and understand things a lot faster. Then after that, the captain is returned to the bridge and orders Spock to make sure that Gary is watched, and undergoes a full series of tests to try and find out what is causing this and what could the eventual outcome of his increasing powers be. Because similar events seem to happen on the Valiant, which led to the Valiant's destruction, and being the captain, needing to make sure that the ship is safe, he's trying to, and also for his friend, trying to find out what the heck is going on. And this will be another classic episode or the first classic episode to demonstrate or the theory of absolute power corrupts absolutely, and how we need to be careful how we treat the power that we're given. But I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Gary continues to test his powers to the point where he finds that he's even got control over his own life and his own death, which could make him very very dangerous, a very dangerous person to be around. It's going to be interesting to see how this continues to play out, because another kind of recurring theme that that we have in our world today, again 50 years later, is that the chase or the search for immortality, and it's becoming less and less of a biological thing, I find, and more of a digital thing. That people are trying to find ways to be made immortal online, to be remembered, to be known and recognized in some form or another. But there are people who kind of take this to an extreme and have created wonderful works of art and works of music and and various media type things, TV shows, movies, and books and other things which have created characters and worlds without end for us to explore. And those people who create these works will be remembered, but immortality or physical immortality is not something that we can achieve in our mortal lifetime. I could go into a religious kind of aspect on this as well, but I want to keep this as much to Star Trek and to the Star Trek world as possible, into our own kind of real world, as it were. So I'll leave that side alone. But there are a lot of connotations that and kind of lessons that we can learn from this episode as well. While Dr. Dana is with Gary, he's starting to wonder about the nature of his powers. He's starting to wonder what his power, what the extent of his powers are going to be, and she was also having a similar curiosity. And at this point, curious about his mind, about what the fact that he's able to go through the ship's library or half the ship's library in less than a day, and that his memory is now perfect with everything that he's read. She pulls out a rather romantic love sonnet, and you can tell that there's an obvious flirtation kind of happening between the two. And it's going to be... She is not showing any signs of anything, by the way, which I'm finding, again, interesting, that despite the fact that they were both hit with the same kind of electric energy, Gary, with the higher Esper level, is the one who's starting to show signs of power, and while Dr. Dana's are not as high as his, she is showing no symptoms of or outward signs of these kinds of abilities, which I do find interesting. I mean, the ratings between the two I don't think were overly different. But I'm finding it interesting that they were different to sufficient to mean that there's at least a delay, of some form, to her displaying similar abilities. Gary's friend and the helmsman, Kelso, comes in to the room, and they have a little light banter, and then Gary tells him that there's some damage to the ship, which, if not looked at immediately, would cause the ship to be in a much worse condition, more explosions and so on, which surprises Kelso, because Mitchell's been in sickbay this whole time, but naturally, whenever there's potential danger to the ship, you do need to go have a look. So he does, and he's stunned to find that the damage is exactly as Gary had said that it was going to be. and so he managed to prevent further damage to the ship. So well done, Gary, on that particular point. But you can also see with the way that with Gary's attitude that he's starting to view regular humans to be a little bit less than him. Not quite. Hasn't quite gotten to the fully I'm superior than you level yet, but you can see that in him. You can see it starting to come out, and that is a dangerous facet that comes whenever there is power offered to someone. If they don't keep their humility about them, power becomes very dangerous to those who are not humble and don't know how to properly use and wield it. Now we have our expositional briefing scene, and I do find both points of view to be valid in that they are wanting to talk about what Gary is turning into, what his powers could mean. Most of them are being cautious and thinking that with more power he's going to need us less and less, and to the point where we could almost be an annoyance. Because what would someone who can control a ship from a single room by a mere thought? What would someone who can create anything out of mere desire want with such feeble, weakling humans? Then you've got Dr. Dana, who is saying, well, this is obviously going to be miraculous. It's going to be a wonderful, fantastic thing. Let's let this happen. Which I do understand, that point of view, but I am more with the rest of the crew in terms of the cautiousness of it, because one thing that Gary is not showing is the humility and the humanity needed to be able to control properly the powers that he is being given. He's showing an arrogance and a I don't know how to properly describe it, but he's not showing that that he's able to control his powers. He's letting his powers control him and change the man who he was into this person, which is, while he may be able to do all these wonderful things, is not doing them for the benefit of others, but is doing them for the benefit of himself. After the meeting breaks, Spock and Kirk have their own meeting as first officer and captain, and I do think they're starting to build up a bit of a friendship here. And Spock essentially offers Kirk two options. There's a planet nearby, Delta Vega, where they can start get the materials they need to repair the ship. But as far as Gary's concerned, the two options are to either kill him or strand him. Either option not palatable at all. That would make Kirk a murderer, which is something which he would never do. And he essentially tells Spock, look, this is my friend, and you want me to leave him here to to evolve into heaven knows what, and because there's no way to know that even leaving him on Delta Vega would have a positive outcome for him. Sure, he'd learn to use the resources available on that world to survive, and he can continue to create what he needs to do so. But he would also eventually gain too much power to be left for that world to be sufficient for him, and it would only delay the problem and leave it for this almost godlike type being with no humility, very little humanity from what I've seen, and make a much larger problem for the Federation to have to deal with, and something which they were or are at that particular point in no way able to deal with. So stranding not the ideal circumstance either, and there has to be some kind of third option, which I personally can't think of, but yeah, it's one of the hardest choices that a captain ever has to make, and that is who lives and who dies, and what. You do have to learn to make those impossible choices, even for those that you care about. There's even more signs of Gary's powers now. he's obviously gained telepathy, among other things, to be able to, and telekinesis. And as the captain and Spock try to incapacitate him, he's able to kind of shock them away. So he's got some kind of offensive, kind of abilities as well. But he is still human, and they do manage to kind of knock him out and drug him, at least temporarily, to be able to get him down to the planet so they can continue to explore their options in terms of what to do with him. After successfully beaming down to the surface, the repair crew is starting to do what they need to repair the ship, to get the equipment they need. The captain is looking at an option of blowing the whole station facility up, if need be, to try and contain Gary, in case he proves to be uncontainable, as it were. Then Kirk and Gary are talking while Gary's in the brig, and personally, I have to agree with with a line that Gary says that you should have killed me then, when you had a chance, back on the ship, instead of letting me live, and you're a fool if you don't, for not doing it. While I do very much disagree with the whole idea of one person killing another, I can understand the sentiment in this particular circumstance, because again, Gary is showing that that as far as absolute power and how he how he would handle it, he's demonstrating quite clearly that he can't, that he would abuse it and use it for his own selfish ends, rather than kind of managing it properly, and using it to to help others the way that that kind of power should be used. And that makes him be a very, as I stated before, now it makes him very dangerous. And Kirk, while is letting his feelings of friendship and his own humanity kind of get in the way of the tough decision that will eventually need to be made, whether now or later on when Gary can't be controlled, because he tries taking on the entire Federation for his own selfish purposes, which is something I can potentially see him doing at some point if he's not properly contained. And now Gary's full colours really show themselves. He just, upon hearing that there's a plan in place to kill him by blowing up the Delta Vega facility, he kills Kelso, the person who had his finger on the button, and knocks out Kirk and Spock, and escapes the facility with Dr. Dana, so that they can try and, because her powers have only just manifested themselves. Throughout this, Dr. Dana is saying that Gary's not evil, that he's still human and shouldn't be killed, and I do agree he's not evil per se, but he has been corrupted by power. Absolute power has corrupted him, absolutely. Shortly after recovering from Gary's knockout blast, if you will, Kirk wakes up and tells the doctor, hold off on waking Spock. I'm going after Gary and Dr. Dana alone. Give me 12 hours to deal with the situation. If you don't hear from me, then I want you to contact Starfleet and have them bombard the planet with neutron radiation, basically eliminate every living thing on the planet, so that Gary has no chance of surviving and getting to a point of becoming a true threat to the Federation, because Kirk really does need to look at the value of one life over that of potentially millions. And while I do know it is a very difficult choice that Kirk is making, it is a choice that that does ultimately need to be made. Gary has once again tested his powers. This time because Elizabeth Dana is initially thinking it's a desert planet. How the heck are we going to survive? Says, let me create a little miracle for you, and creates this small Edenistic plain, if you will, a little bit of water, some fruit trees and whatnot, to show that I can do whatever I want. I can create whatever I want. And again, while it may be a pleasant kind of thing that he's created, it does once again kind of demonstrate potentially how dangerous he is becoming. So here is where Kirk finally shows that that he's getting it. He hasn't voiced it until now, but he sees that that his friend is essentially gone. That while the weaknesses and frailties that his friend has got are all starting to come out, and that is making him dangerous. And Elizabeth is still trying to hide it, still trying to think, oh no, it'll be fine. Earth is really unimportant. We're not going to worry about Earth. Who cares about that? But Kirk is saying, look, hold on to humanity for 1 minute longer and see what Gary is becoming, and help me, kind of stop him.